Hello, cats and kittens, and welcome to Music 104 Online. Week 12, the 7/7 chord. The 7/7 chord is a particularly unusual species in that it has different manifestations in major and minor. Let's listen carefully. So here's the first one in major. And here's that same progression, but in minor. You'll note that in minor, the raised scale degree 7 makes its appearance to make it so that it is not a B flat in the bass, but otherwise there's a different quality to the chord. So let's dive into what the difference might be. It helps when we're talking about these 7 chords to look at them as two pairs of fifths that are interlocked together. So if we look at the first one on the top left, that's the one in major, and it consists of well, sorry, let me back up for a second. The main difference between the two chords, of course, is that we've got an A natural in the major, whereas we have an A flat in the minor. Now, back to the major, if we look at the composition of this has implications for how this chord is constructed. So the first interval we have here is a diminished fifth between B and F natural. And the second interval we have, because of the A natural, is a perfect fifth, so D to A. So we can talk about the 7 chord in major as being a diminished fifth interlocked with a perfect fifth. This situation is different in minor. Now, true, we have the same diminished fifth from B natural to F natural as the bottom fifth of this 7th chord. But because of the A flat, we now have D to A flat, which is not a perfect fifth, but another diminished fifth. So if you want to think of it this way, the 7 chord in minor is a diminished fifth interlocked with another diminished fifth, giving it a very pungent woman being tied to the railroad tracks in a 1920s movie kind of feel to it. So the one in minor we call fully diminished because we have, in fact, 2 diminished fifths in it. However, since we only have 1 diminished fifth for the 7 chord in major, we call this kind of chord a half diminished chord. So let's talk about function. How does the 7 chord function? So here I've put a 5/7 chord next to the 7 chord, and you should be able to see a few things in common. Obviously, the one on the left, the 5 chord, is dominant function. But since the only appreciable difference between the two chords is that in one chord we have a G, and in the other chord we have an A flat, that means we have 3 common tones. We also consider the second chord to be part of dominant function, though it doesn't have the same kind of phrase articulating function that a root position 5 chord, and only a root position 5 chord, has. Okay, let's listen. Very similar sounds, maybe a bit tenser on the fully diminished 7th chord. Now it's worth mentioning that the fully diminished 7th chord is, or rather the 7/7 chord, is much more common to see in minor because the 2 diminished fifths means that you basically will never get parallels, and composers just love that fully diminished sound. So you listen to Bach, particularly his organ works, you can find that chord all over the place. All right, so how do we use the 7/7 chord? Well, much like the 6 and the 4/6, the 7/7 has a direct corollary. In other words, wherever 7/7 works, 5/7 inversions work, and wherever 5/7 inversions work, 7/7 works, and 7/7 and its inversions. So let's take a look. So on team 5/7, we've got the classic 1-5-6-5-1 chord progression, which should be all familiar to us. But this chord progression, it has a precise equivalent in team 7/7, and that is this one, the 1-7-7-1 progression. Again, the only difference between the 5-6-5 and the 7/7 is the G in the 5-6-5 and the A flat in the 7/7. Let's listen. So just as the 5-6-5 harmonizes the 1-7-1 neighbor tone motion in the bass, the 7/7 chord also harmonizes that 1-7-1, I'm talking scale degrees there, neighbor tone motion in the bass. So let's look at another example of another inverted 5/7 chord, 5-4-3. So we know 5-4-3 specifically as the passing tone motion between 1 and 1-6, so let's give that a listen to. And in team 7/7, we have a chord that does exactly the same thing. In this case, 7-6-5, doing that passing motion between 1 and 1-6, going 1-2-3 in the bass, just like 5-4-3. Lastly, we have the incomplete neighbor motion that is presented to us by the 5-4-2 chord. This is often done as a move from 1 to 1-6, where we leap up to the upper neighbor tone of scale degree 3 and then come down. It's said to be incomplete because we didn't start on that scale degree 3. So let's listen to this one. And this has an exact corollary over in team 7/7. Let's see if you can guess it. Take a second to think about it. Which inversion of 7 do you think is likely to substitute for 5-4-2? Bearing in mind that when it was 5-6-5, we had 7/7. When it was 5-4-3, we had 7-6-5. If you follow the pattern, you should come to the following conclusion. And it's 7-4-3. So it's like all the 7 chords are one step behind the 5 chords, if you will, right? So that 5-6-5 is 7-7 in root position, 5-4-3 is 7-6-5, and 5-4-2 is 7-4-3. Let's give it a listen. So I hope that this little illustration makes it very clear that 7/7 can substitute for inversions of 5/7 in these 3 cases without really changing the meaning of the music too much. Maybe by adding a little bit more anguish than was there before. But still, basically contrapuntally doing exactly the same kinds of things. So let's move on to a case where there is no corollary in team 5. And there is one, and that is our outlier, the 7-4-2 chord. The 7-4-2 chord is a bit of a weirdo. It doesn't show up a whole lot, but when it does show up, it tends to show up in only one context, and that's as an introduction to the cadential 6-4 chord. So if we have it, as you can see, we've got that on this particular chord progression, and there it is, 7-4-2, introducing a cadential 6-4. But if you look carefully, obviously this is really just a Phrygian cadence, right? 1-4-6 moving to 5. That's the principal motion of the whole phrase. And so since this 7-4-2 and the cadential 6-4 are kind of like bells and whistles that we're adding on at the end, what we would consider this to be is a kind of dominant embellishment. So it's adding details and interest without really changing the meaning of the phrase. Let's give it a listen. So that completes our discussion of the 7-7 chord. Most of it should be fairly familiar to you already, except for the 7-4-2, which is a little bit of a strange one. But that should be, I don't think it's too difficult to get a grasp on. Let's take a look at what's coming up over the next week. We've got week 12 singing activity videos, which will be due as YouTube links as usual on Monday, April 13th, as well as week 12 transcriptions, which will also be due on Monday, April 13th. Those you submit online on Blackboard, if you please. I am still looking forward to the rest of the semester. We're going to have homework through to the finals week, and at this point I think I feel comfortable saying that I will not do a final check-in for dictation or singing in the final in finals week. I think this has been a most difficult semester for all of us, so you can take finals week off on me. A few thank yous at the end. I've taken on a few more roles in the production of my videos, as you can see, and of course I could not do any of this without my trusty stunt coordinator, Ichigo T. Cat, who is around here somewhere, probably leaping at doorknobs trying to get in somewhere she doesn't belong. I hope you all have a good week. Work hard, but not too hard, and take care of yourselves. Stay sane, stay well, stay safe. Dr. E, over and out.